Welcome to the Franchise Woman podcast, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made, and relationships forged. I'm Rebecca Monet, CEO and Chief Scientist at Zoracle Profiles, along with my co-host, community advocate, speaker, author, and entrepreneur, Tracy Kawa. Our special guest today is Sharon Mettra. Sharon started her career in franchising working at a local Jack in the Box at age 16. Then in 1999, Sharon became the first female franchisee to own a big tire franchise in Northern California. Her kids gave her a bad time because she didn't even know how to change a tire. After coming out of retirement, Sharon stepped into the franchise development role, selling franchises for companies like Zoyo, My Pie Pizza, Fuchsia, LA Bikini, Next Staff, Solaris, Philly's Best Cheesesteaks, and of course now, Press Waffle Company. So welcome, Sharon, to the show.
Thank you, Rebecca. Thank you, Tracy.
Yeah, nice to see you. Sharon, you seem to have this really long track record in franchise. Take us back a little bit. Where did all of this begin? Tell us about your childhood a little bit.
Well, let's see, my mother was 15 years old when she had me and went on to have 4 more children after me. And the 2 oldest, my sister and I, were then adopted by our grandparents and raised by our grandparents. And later on in life, we found out there were all different fathers. And my sister is 68 and just found out who her real father was not too long ago. Wow. But I did know who I did at 25, look up my father. He was a private investigator and I knew his name. So I found him in the telephone book and called him and discussed meeting him. So I met my father at 25, and he was probably the basis for my business career because he taught me all about business, put me under his wing, and led me through 15 years of business in the background company and the private investigation world, which was very interesting to me. Never a dull moment. So
no, never, definitely not in that space. There's no dull moment. Yeah. So it's fascinating. Your childhood, where you're raised by your grandparents. Your mama is only 15 years old, really not able to be a mama to you. And then you're 25 when you find your father. The role that your father then played wasn't really that of what we would call a daddy, right? It was more of how would you describe that role?
I attribute him to my not being able to go to college because of financial. I contribute him to my knowledge in business and giving me, maybe he knew who I was better than anybody else, and he led me down that road. And I've loved business ever since then. I mean, I just love creating business, making business, doing business, and figuring things out to be successful. So
yeah, I mean, it's nice that you were able to cultivate that relationship, even if it was a little bit later in life, and that you were able to learn all of these amazing business skills.
Yes. Well, he was a genius at putting businesses together, and he's very creative, much more creative than I was. I was more the detail person. I would do the detail side of the business, but he was just brilliant at coming up with thoughts to the point of driving people crazy at times because he always had these big ideas, but you got to be able to put them to work. So I used to tell him, okay, how are we going to do that? And he'd go, you figure it out. So that's kind of what our roles were. And I had to go to him many times and say, we can't do this, or, or this is how we should do it, or whatever. But yeah, we worked together for 15 years.
What a great.
And we sold the companies. So we sold the company, which gave me the funds to buy my first franchise. And so that's how I got into my first franchise in 1999. And I did some soul searching with what I wanted to do. I looked at Krispy Kreme very seriously, but they were sold out in Arizona. And I said, okay, what is it that the internet won't take over and everybody needs? Where is the value? I need to have something that people need. And I ended up in a tire mechanic franchise. So that's basically how I got there. And they didn't have any in Arizona. So my daughter was going to college in Sac State, and they had one up there close to it. So I moved up there and ran the business up there. So
it's so not only so this relationship with your father, and then you guys sell the business, which then afforded you a way to go into your own business, but you chose to go into franchising. But it's a very logical, pragmatic decision process for you. It sounds like it was less about the business and more about that it was something people always needed. So it's not a wham bam kind of a business. And you had this specific criteria that says, give me a business that does the following things. People are going to come back on a regular basis. They're always going to need it. It's never going to, run out of customers. And then you ended up in Big O Tire. Now that has to be a story in and of itself, because this was the late 1990s, right? When the world of cars and mechanics has always been a man's world, even today, but it had to be even more so back then, right?
That's correct. But I'd already been in a 15-year business with only men, private investigators, corporate security, police, anybody that needed background information for any type of investigation, whether they were doing corporate due diligence or they're doing pre-employment background checks. And I traveled the country doing seminars on limiting employer liability. So, and I did that by myself. So we would advertise in a city, and I would do a presentation for why they needed to do background checks. Now, if you think about in the late 80s and 90s, no one was doing background checks, but my father had created a little tiny floppy disk that you could put in your computer. And these were dumb terminals that you could put in there and do this program where you could request information for all of those types of reasons. So I used to teach people how to do that and why they needed that. So I was in a male industry for 15 years. So going into tire and mechanic, even though I didn't know it, the idea of franchising is, which I tell everybody now when I'm selling a franchise, is that you have support there. You get support. You will not be left out. You don't need to know how to do it. You just need to have the passion for what you are doing to be able to learn it. And the support came. I didn't change a tire. I hired people to change tires. I ran the business, and I knew how to do that because I worked with my father for so long. So
it was really like you could have jumped into any business as long as it was a viable business.
Correct. I'd already had several businesses before. I created a little decorating business. It was called Decorating on a Budget in my 20s. And then when we sold the company, I went into business consulting because I had a non-compete for a while. And I consulted with businesses on how to do background checks and what they needed or where they needed to go to get the information. So that was the third business. And then Big O was my fourth. And yeah, so exactly. I had other businesses. So
right. Do you ever look back on your life and say, did I really do
Yes.
I really do that?
Yes. Yeah. I do believe there's a greater, I believe in God, and I believe there's a greater reason for me that what I've done is based on someone bigger than me, that's helped me through this process and always been there. So yeah.
Yeah. It's funny because that's a good question, Tracy. When you get to a certain stage in life, I think you do look back and reflect and ask yourself, did I really do that? Did I create that? Did I make that happen? And did I really make that big of a decision? So I do think we get to a reflective place in life. So Sharon, when you look back over your life, what are the things that stand out that you're proud of and still to this day can smile about when you look back?
Well, definitely my children and my grandchildren and how wonderful they are. They're wonderful parents. They've been married 22 years, both of them. And they're raising beautiful children, and my grandchildren are in good hands. And there's nothing more successful to not have to worry about that. And they're both successful in their own rights, not crazy mom that did so many crazy things in her life. But I do have a son-in-law that kind of follows. He always calls me and wants to know about his crazy ideas because nobody ever wants to hear them, and he knows I'll listen to him. So
That's great.
he calls me every so often. But yeah, I think that I've always known that no matter what I did, I'd be okay.
Mhm.
And I don't know why I had that, but I never had fear. And when I'm interviewing franchisees, you know, Rebecca, you've got 50% that I do emerging brands, and that's very, very scary for 50% of the people. But then 50% of the people will go, I think it's great. We're getting in at the ground level. So you have a very definite break there on either whether the emerging brand is going to be something for them or not. And I listen to people, and I always tell them, this may not be for you because, and the profile helps with that, because this may not be for you based on it being emerging. And I'm not selling anything, because I am not selling a thing. I'm helping them to understand, is this for you? Is it a fit for you? And does this work for the franchisor? So that's basically what I'm doing. But people have fear. They and I really never had that. Somehow I just knew I could make it work. What that was, I don't know. And that's what I said. It's just, I don't know how I've done this, but I just didn't have that fear. I went into a big old tire in a small town of 3,500 that had a Walmart in it. So you knew
Wow.
it serviced more than 3,500, and it ended up servicing 40,000. But there were also 4 other tire companies there, and Firestone was right across the street from where my business was. But
Wow.
it didn't scare me. And even the Chamber of Commerce said, we don't need another tire place. And I went, okay. So, and went ahead and did it. And honestly, it was successful. And I did car shows, and I gave free lunch to the community. And I came up with a lot of different things to make it successful and make people want to come in. The number one thing that I said when I bought that is, it's going to be a Nordstrom's, is what I said. This tire store is going to be a Nordstrom. And I told all my gentlemen that had to be clean. And so most people thought I was the cleaning lady. And this is no joke. They thought because I was always cleaning the floors, the bathrooms, and everything when they would come in, because they worked with the guys. They didn't work with me. I was running the business with the closed doors. So, but I just knew I would be okay. And I don't know where that came from, but that's been through my whole life. So
That's amazing.
It is kind of amazing. And I do see you that way, Sharon. And I think one of the other things that you can look back on and be proud of is not just having run your own successful business, but you do mentor, coach, guide, edify, whatever the word is, prospective franchisees as they're looking at concepts, especially concepts that are emerging, which are considered a little bit more high risk because we haven't had a chance to prove ourselves the same way. So I think you can look back at your past and be very proud of that too, that not everybody is a Sharon and is fearless and has that kind of belief. They need someone like you and a franchisor to come alongside that says you're making the right decision and this is how you do it. And that's, I think, what makes franchising so beautiful, and is what makes you so beautiful in terms of how you guide people through that process. I mean, I wished everybody was fearless like you. I can relate because I'm similar, but most people aren't.
No, they're not. And it's a distinct division. I mean, you'll find the ones that are not fearful. they don't ask those questions because they're not fearful, but you'll have the other ones that are, and you need to embellish that. You need to talk to them and tell them at some point, this may not be for you. And here, I was a franchisee, and here's what I can tell you from my experience, and that kind of thing. So I don't want someone to buy first of all, I don't want my franchisor to have a closed store. And I don't want someone to invest their whole life living their whole retirement program into a business that isn't right for them. So it's really important that you make sure they feel comfortable, and they feel. I've had several that have stopped right at the end because they couldn't pull the trigger. So, they just get to the end and they just can't do it for fear. And usually it's competition, which is interesting. They're usually a fear of competition, or the brand's it's not going to be. I love it when people say, oh, well, it's just a concept right now, or it's really, it's a fad or whatever. And I tell them everything's a fad. Everything starts as a fad, everything. And that makes more sense to them, because I go, Subway started as a fad. Misogyny started as a fad. Those were all fads, and they're still here. So it's how you run your store and the franchisor, whether they keep up with the times. So, yeah.
Yeah.
I think maybe this deep faith that you have, that you were mentioning before, coupled with the fact that your dad gave you this amazing education in business. And it also sounds like I'm picking up on this theme that you've learned different industries, and then you've shared and guided others throughout those industries. I know Rebecca mentioned coaching a little while ago. Maybe you can tell us a little bit more about that. And also, is that accurate to say that you learn and then guide others, and learn and guide others?
Definitely. I feel like my responsibility, I think all of our responsibility is when we learn something, when we know something, and someone comes to us that needs that knowledge and they want it. It's not force it down them, but to help them. And a lot of people don't know that they need that, or maybe they'll say something, and that's a big part of me. I hear people, and I think I hear them. So I listen to my prospects or my coaching people. I hear what they're saying. So you usually can figure out what it is they need to hear from you. And I think that's a big part. I did the coaching thing when in my 30s. First of all, I went to every little thing I put in my coaching program was from things that I had learned from my childhood that were not setting right with me, or that I was having difficulty understanding, or why do I think like this, or why is my mind, because we grow up thinking whatever our grandchildren, our grandmothers, or our parents tell us is fact, and that's what we are raised with. And we don't really realize we have the power to change that. And most people just keep doing the same thing, and they think that's all there is. They don't think they have that ability to change those thought processes that are creating havoc in their life. And some of the thought processes were left with me were creating havoc in my life. So I started on a path to just understanding, why do I think that way? Why do I keep doing these things? And I went to all kinds of freaky little things to find. I went to a gypsy woman that studied with the Indians and took a course from her that was so beautiful. And because she had this deep spiritual thing inside of her, she could read people too. And it's a gift to be able to read people. And I learned so much from her about myself. I used a mentor that was around a long, long time ago, and I read all of his books, and it was a self-help psychiatrist. And he actually had you speak into a microphone so you could hear you were lying to yourself, right? So I did that. And so then you discover, oh, I'm really not telling the truth here. Do you love your grandmother? Oh yeah, I love my grandmother. So it was one of those things where I wanted to go deep inside of me to find out what makes me tick, and why I'm acting this way, and why do I feel these things. And through that, I learned to change my thought processes. And that's where it all came from. So I collected information on everybody. I went to a St. Francis workshop in Phoenix that it was on a night, and they would always have a class on something, and I would learn more about myself, and it was just self-esteem or any of that. So I just collected everything, and then I put a program together, and it was all about that process, that thought process that keeps you from moving forward or keeps you stuck. And if we stay stuck, it's usually because we're getting a benefit. So figure out what the benefit is.
Yeah.
And see if it weighs, if that benefit is good enough, then stay in it. But if not, you got to, that benefit isn't going to work for you for very long. So that's kind of that's where the program was. So
Wow.
It's interesting because this idea of speaking out what you're thinking, if we really heard ourselves and the self-talk that was going on, or we were writing it down, we would go, well, that's crazy. Why am I thinking that? Or why is that there? So I like the process you just described where you actually speak it out in a microphone and you're going, really? How is that beneficial to me? Is that really what I believe? Is that really what I want to believe? But
his name was David Viscott. He died young, but I actually went to one of his seminars. But back then, everything was, you didn't go to psychiatrists or psychologists, Rebecca, we did, and they didn't dispense drugs, right? It wasn't like it is now. So I love the fact that this gentleman came out with self-help books, and that's what he called it. He's a self-help psychiatrist. And so I read everything he had, and it's about relationships. And that talking in the microphone was what he did for me to discover what I really was thinking deep down inside. You'd play it back and you'd go, oh, that was not the truth, So it was really very, very, very good way to diagnose yourself. So
I think that's good advice for anyone that's listening. If you're in a stuck state or feel like you're treading, or you're in a place where you have some decisions to make, or whatever, you're not happy, you're not fulfilled, you're not content, whatever it is to stop and reflect and listen to that mind chatter, write things down, speak it out, get some feedback, whatever it takes. I think this generation is better about those types of things than our generation. Sharon, you were cutting edge when you were first discovering these things. Today, I think the younger generation understands that how powerful the mind is, and how it either gets us where we want to go or it doesn't.
They have so many more opportunities now and knowledge out there than we had back then, because it was taboo. I mean, the fact that my grandparents didn't tell me I was adopted till I was a teenager, that was a scar. It really was a scar, but that was not something they did. They didn't talk about those things. They didn't, they didn't want that public. They didn't want the shame of it and all that. And now we're so much more open to be truthful about those things. So that really is, and we have the ability to pick up a book in a library and read about this, or so many people have written their books on all of the things they've gone through in their life that they have examples to look at. Oh, well, she made it, or I made it. So yeah.
Which means I can too.
I can, yeah.
Right, inspiration. Sharon, do you have any defining moments in your life or an obstacle that stands out to you that you had to overcome, like a specific?
Well, being a female and being so male oriented, I guess you would say, wanting to be in men's business. I thrived, but it was hard. It was tough, because the very first time in my father's business, he had me do a seminar, and the men just crucified me. I can just tell you that I was 32. Okay. I was 32 years old, and it was my first experience of standing up and talking about the background business, and they were just brutal. And I got off stage, but I ended up crying. And I told myself at that moment that I would never do that again. And so I started just digging in and learning all I could and doing all I could. And they ended up respecting me because I was that I had the knowledge that they needed to do good backgrounds. And so they had to come to me, and I earned that respect. As guess what? I had to earn that respect. And as Rebecca and I were talking before, nowadays they don't have to work as hard as we did back then, but we had to work really hard. And I'm fine with that. I think I think I don't ever resent that. I think that was good for me because it's gotten me to where I am today. So, but every business I was in was a male-oriented business. So that would probably be an obstacle that I would say that I had to learn to work with.
Well, and it's interesting because the way you got beyond it, or at least one tactic that you used, was to become the expert, to get where you were extremely knowledgeable, where your authority, your credibility was not questioned. And I think that's what a lot of women did then, which of course only made us stronger, more capable, and allowed us to progress down the road. Were there any other strategies that you used as a woman when you were dealing with men? Because sometimes we need men to help us along the way, whatever, to lift a heavy box or whatever it is we need to do. Do you have any, and did you use any strategies other than just your brains?
No, definitely. I relied on men to teach me things I needed because I was in their business. So I would not have a problem reaching out to them and asking, could you help me with this, or where would I go to get this resource or whatever? And that would soften that they had a female that was 30 something in their business, so that would soften that, and it made it easier and I did learn. I remember once being at a conference and wanting to learn to play craps, and a table full of men, and this is in the 90s, and I stood there and they were all helping me learn to play craps. And I learned craps because they go, okay, well, I think you need to do this. So I think me being softer, or not attacking them, or not, making them feel intimidated. That's not my personality. I want everybody to feel warm and fuzzy. And I think I got a lot of help because of that, because it wasn't like, I am woman, hear me roar. I'm a woman that don't know what I'm doing in this male industry. So can you help me?
Help me out.
Yeah. And I think it was real. It wasn't fake. It was just, I learned because they helped me, and I grew because of that. So, but then I put it into action and wanted to be the best too. So that's
I applaud you. I used similar early in my career, was to recognize that men had knowledge, and they had experience, and they had strengths that I didn't have, and use my femininity to say, can you help me? Can you teach me? Can you show me? And I can't think of a single time that a man said no. Usually the opposite. They're like, how else can I help? What else can I do?
right.
They're kind of wired that way. They really do want to empower us. We just need to give them a chance to do so.
Right. I agree.
Sharon, I want to take this another direction. I have an off-the-wall question for you. Success. How do you define it?
Success to me is not financially driven. It's mostly driven by relationships, and building relationships, helping people to find their dreams or find where they should be, help coaching them into understanding where they fit best, and if it's a fit for them or if it isn't a fit for them. And that's based on my vast years of experiences in businesses. So I take that, and I actually have turned people away saying that I didn't think this was for them because of fear, or I just had a gentleman recently that wanted to go into real estate, and he was looking at franchises, and I told him, I said, I think real estate would be better for you at this point. And I just told him, and he goes, thank you for saying that, because that's what I was thinking. So I definitely think it's all about the other person and helping them to be successful, because I've had years and years of being able to do it. So if I can help others, I love doing that. So.
Yeah, and I think that's where your strong listening skills come in. Right. Earlier, you were talking about just listening to other people and really hearing what they have to say. And instead of pushing our own agenda forward, really get into what it is that they need and what would be best for their lives and their families. Yeah.
Have you ever done a call with a development person? I've done some secret shopping, and you do a call and all they do is go through the spiel, oh, and we saw this many, That's not something I do. I send the information out. I ask them, did you have a chance to look at the information? And they say, yes. And I said, well, do you have any questions I could answer? Instead of me going through the whole thing. And then if they say, well, no, I didn't get to look at it, I go, would you like me to give you some bullet points? So it's always letting them tell me what they want to hear, not me just doing a spiel, because I think you just lose people at that point. Plus, you don't get to hear what their needs are too. So it is important to do that. So.
Yeah.
I think that's coaching, isn't it? Coaching, really?
Coaching.
Isn't that what
Yeah.
coaching is?
I was just having a conversation with a franchisor that's in the coaching space, and we were talking just about that, Sharon, about coaching is about pulling out of someone, where advising and consulting is this way, as is oftentimes misunderstood about selling. Selling isn't pitching and selling and convincing and overcoming objections. It's about revealing and pulling out of a person what they need, what they want, where they're going, and seeing if our product, service, or in this case, franchise, is a way they can get where they want to go. So I think you're completely reframing this idea of franchise development and franchise sales. Yeah. So when you look back over your life, Sharon, and you would offer some advice to these couple of generations coming up, and what one thing, two things, three things would you say, I recommend you do this, or look at that, or consider this? What advice would you give?
Well, specifically to franchising, if we're talking specifically, I let them know that I'm a consultant for companies, that I've had franchises, that I understand what they're going through, and I know how to be a franchisee. So I let them know that. And then I tell them, so I would advise you to really get to know the franchisor that you're going to be working with for 10 years. It's very important you know who that is, and you're going to be able to tell whether you can, get along real well, if you can have passion for his brand or her brand, and also be able to help develop that brand. The other thing is just having passion for whatever you're going to do, whatever that is, having that passion for it, because these are long hours. It's not easy for the build out I do not make that fluffy. I'm not selling. I tell them this is the roughest period going through the lease and the build out, and it's going to be not easy, and hiring people and all of that. But once you get those doors open, you have to have that passion for what you're doing. So that's how I advise them to think of it.
Beautiful.
The passion and purpose, right?
Exactly.
You want to
Passion, purpose. Yeah. Sharon, so tell us, where can people reach you?
Oh, for
an idea.
Let's see. You want my email address or what?
Yeah, email address, website,
okay.
LinkedIn.
Yeah, LinkedIn. I'm Sharon Mettra on LinkedIn, and it's also Facebook. It's just Sharon Mettra, Mettra. And you could reach me at Sharon at Press Waffle Co. That's presswaffleco.com. So that's my website for the franchise that I'm selling right now. So
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you, Sharon.
you're welcome.
Really
Nice.
appreciate, before Tracy, I have you do a wrap up. I had a few takeaways from this, including this whole idea of not letting your past define you,
Yeah.
but using your past as a stepping stone. Sharon, you had a difficult childhood, but that made you who you were. So there's no looking back and looking at it with regret or shame or pain. It's that's who I was, and this is what it led me to, and I continue to grow. So it says a lot about your character. There was no blame, there was no shame, there was no regret. This is who I am, and I'm going to build off of it. So that shows a lot about your character. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
Tracy, any final words from you?
I love that. First of all, I just love what you just said, right? Many people spend their lives beating themselves up over their past that they can't go back and change.
Mm-hmm.
So if you use it as a vehicle to take you where you want to go instead, it's such a beautiful concept.
Really is.
Yeah, my takeaway is that I just love Sharon's holistic, well-rounded ability and skills and gifts to be able to coach someone, mentor someone, talk to them about franchise, explain things, even her past expertise from various industries. I love that. I love how you've set yourself up, just wanting to learn and obtain as much knowledge as possible and then impart that on others. So I applaud you for that. Love that as the societal in me.
Societal, I know. I'm societal too.
I'm a societal. Yeah.
There it is.
There is a bunch of societal sitting here going, how can we help? And who else can we edify? And
yeah, absolutely. I was wondering what your profile looked like, and there it is. That's great. Yeah, thank you.
Thanks again, Sharon.
You're welcome.
And for the rest of you listening in today to the Franchise Woman, where passion and purpose collide, profits are made and relationships are forged. We're delighted you are here, and we'll see you next week for another episode.